Hello, ladies and gentlemen, and yes, it is. I decided I was going to check out another video by Maximilian Robespierre, mostly because I couldn't find the original clip for this, because this is one that I think I need to really shell over, because this clip has been making the rounds on social media. It is two people who are attending a food bank, and what these are apparently very proud voters of the Conservative Party, and they're going to try and justify why voting for the Conservatives is a good thing. Now, the discussions about this is already made very, very clear. Now, some people have assumed that this is somewhat of a publicity stunt, the idea being that there are people who literally know nothing about what's going on in the world right now, or even what's going on within the ramifications of the Conservative Party as we speak. But there are also plenty of people who are suggesting that there's no parody or irony going on, and these two are very, very genuine in their approach, and saying that they genuinely do believe the Conservative Party is doing the absolute best for this country. I would like to point out, however, ladies and gentlemen, that food banks were never a thing when Tony Blair was in government, and it was never a thing when Gordon Brown was in government. It was only a thing that's ever been started from at least 2014 onwards, to my knowledge, anyway. So we go all the way back to David Cameron. They haven't stopped ever since, Cameron, Theresa May, Boris Johnson, Liz Truss, and now Rishi Sunak. None of these things have ever gone away, and there's very little evidence to suggest that it's ever going to be reversed anytime soon. Then, of course, there's the issue. They could also say something about immigration as well. But once again, I'd like to point out this was never an issue before with Tony Blair and Gordon Brown. Now, you may suggest that's because, we had things like the Syrian civil war throughout the 2010s, and there's also a huge international conflict going on in Europe as we speak that's been going on for 2 years. However, if this is thing that's mentioned, then I'll only make it short. I think the best thing for me to do is only ever bring it up if it's at any point relevant whatsoever. So, with that being said, let's see what these two have got to say for themselves, or rather, let's see what they think is good about Sunak's regime.
Hi guys, you may have seen this video doing the rounds. If you haven't, you'll be both shocked and annoyed.
Yeah.
So a man and a woman were stopped on their way to a food bank by a reporter who had no doubt interviewed the public about which party they will likely support in the general election. The two individuals who were on their way to a frigging food bank told the journalist that they backed the Conservative Party and Prime Minister Rishi Sunak. Why? Well, have a listen for yourself.
Go on, let's hear it.
Lee and Pippa, who both have ill health, say they struggle to get by. They stopped to talk with me on their way to the food bank.
That's where we're going now.
Because the cost of living is gone through the roof.
You still think the Conservatives should sort of get back in?
They've helped us more than anybody.
Yes, they have. They stood by.
You know what? Now, again, I think it's going to be a little bit rude for me to say this, but you could suggest that if there were no food banks whatsoever, these two would have been shit out of luck. Maybe that's the only reason why they're suggesting the Conservatives have done any good is because of food banks. Is because without them, they would have been shit out of luck. But and listen, here's the thing. It's not that food banks existing at all is the issue. I mean, well, it's part of the issue, but you've also got to ask the question of, you know what? They would not have people. There were more people living on the breadline in this country than there were 10 years ago. There are more people who are living in poverty, and more people who are at the very top of the tree, who are doing everything in their power to make sure that they stay at the very top and sod the very rest. And with that, with the rise, with things like inflation, with things like extortion and all the rest of it, how are some people even meant to get by at all? And bear in mind, this is only mentioning just two people by themselves. What about in the cases of people who have families to look after? Now, I know immediately what you'll be saying is that why don't people just get better jobs? And my response to that is that I don't think this is a thing that has necessarily escaped people's notice, you know? Because I don't think people just expect to say that, you know, growing up in poverty isn't as bad as it seems. I think people absolutely know that, obviously, growing up in poverty is a terrible idea. You know, but you know what? Again, that's down to people's responsibility and their accountability to actually go for jobs with higher salaries and to, you know, actually be able to support their families. You know what? I'll take a page, for once, I'm going to take a page out of the Reform Party's mantra. It's called common sense. And guess what? You know what? It's just like with my family. You know, my mom and dad, they had the intelligence to realize that if they were going to raise a family at all, then they were going to have to afford to look after one. And that's exactly what they did. And this isn't something that, again, just because you can't, and that's not really something, just because, you know, my parents had the initiative to realize that looking after a family was going to be expensive outside of everything else that it comes with, they just knew what they were supposed to do. And that's why even when things like this come about, it's an outrage. Because this is the sort of thing that shouldn't have come about at all. And again, people might argue, you know, we had things like a financial the Wall Street crash of 2008 and everything else that comes with it, but things can't really be as bad. I mean, France doesn't, as far as I know, France doesn't have this problem. Germany doesn't have this problem. Spain, Italy, the majority of Europe doesn't really have this problem either. So why us? Why are we finding it so hard to, you know, have everything under control? Why us?
With what they've got to play with, which isn't a lot, they've juggled it where it's tried to help the poorer rather than the richer.
He came out and he said,
they've helped because with the poorer rather than the richer. I don't really like to generalize things, and I know you guys probably know I don't like to do that either, but I don't think these two have got any idea. I really don't. When you remember not too long ago, Boris Johnson was making controversies left, right, and centre. One of them in particular was having 10. I don't remember if it was a specific room in Downing Street, or whether or not it was just the whole of it cost 60 grand out of the taxpayers' money to to have gold wallpaper put up, and no, it wasn't 60. I think it was a lot more than that. But people were outraged about. We had to bail Boris Johnson out, from Partygate. Then you have to remember Boris Johnson was found guilty unanimously for lying to the Queen, and. Now I may argue at this point. I don't think these two I don't know if they really know what's going on, because to be honest, I'm not convinced at this point they know what they're doing. Because I don't think I know. Because I don't understand what they're talking about. Oh, now what? Oh dear Lord. Israeli tanks reach center of Rafah, a city branded hell on earth. Okay, that's... Oh god, that's... We'll worry about that when the time comes. Probably might be later tonight, so let's get going.
Soaking wet, God bless him. Roll on. He's been there through COVID. He's been there through everything for us. And
What about the NHS staff, the people who've survived COVID, the people who've kept people alive? You know what? I don't want to blow my own trumpet or anything like that, but I worked all the way through COVID. I was keeping people safe as well, and you know what? I don't expect people to roll the red carpet or nothing like that, but I think Rishi Sunak's had it pretty good, to be honest. I don't know about you.
I'd be so gutted, honestly. I just want Conservative.
Red.
my goodness.
Here it comes.
Deep breaths. Okay. Is it possible that Rishi Sunak was in town and gave these people 50 quid and said, go down to that journalist at the end of the street?
Well, maybe Rishi Sunak hired the journalist as well. Maybe he secretly works with the Conservatives. Do you remember that? Oh, I remember that.
And say really positive things about me and my party. It's possible, or maybe it's not. I don't know. But no, so from the beginning, it mentioned that they have both ill health. Now, it's possible that they have ill health because they haven't been able to access a GP in time or they're stuck on a waiting list. Whose fault is that?
Yeah.
They've been struggling with the cost of living crisis on their way to a food bank, going to a food bank. Once again, I remember reading a story about how some people said, well, at least the Tories have increased the number of food banks in the area.
That's good.
As a positive thing.
What? No, it isn't.
When the Labour Party were in power under Gordon Brown before he was no longer Prime Minister, there were about a dozen food banks, maybe something like 40. Now there are thousands of food banks. There are more food banks than McDonald's restaurants. Food banks are not a good thing. Food banks are a sign of failure of government. They also said that the Tories have helped them more than anyone else. The Tories have been in power for 14 years. You're talking about going to the food bank. You're talking about a cost of living crisis, and you're saying the Tories have done more to help you. The Conservative Party have voted consistently against lifting people out of poverty, against increasing benefits in line with inflation. How is that helping people? Consistently, every Conservative has voted against these measures. My goodness. The guy there also said that the Tories have don't have a lot to play with, so they don't have a lot of money. Well, they had a lot of...
Also, that argument falls flat as well when you realise that, remember, the Conservatives are the people in charge. And by the way, there are some things that absolutely the Conservatives can do that cost no money whatsoever. You want to know what some of those things are, ladies and gentlemen? Actually going out into the public. Actually, working on the front line. Maybe, I don't know, picking litter up in the street. That doesn't cost any money. It improves the image of the Conservatives because it makes you look as though they're doing things that other people don't want to do. They're actually actively getting involved in helping society. Something that no Conservative will ever do before or since. Well, there might have been some who've done it before, but But then again, once again, PR is something that I don't think the Conservatives really understand. And I think they're under the illusion that there is no such thing as bad publicity. Oh yes, there is such a thing as bad publicity, but this is completely goes over there. If it could go over the head of people like Liz Truss, it could easily go over the head of people like Rishi Sunak, Lee Anderson, all of them, to be honest, Labour included. Though I think Labour are, even at this point in time, somewhat more self-aware. In fact, no, they're very self-aware. Because right now, it's their election to lose. And because it almost seems as though things are starting to sew up pretty nicely. But who do I know? I've been proven wrong before because the public wants what the public gets, as they say. If these two are anything to go by.
Of money to transfer to the richest in society during the pandemic, over £700 billion. How many PPE contracts were won, and how much money has been spent on that? And where is this money now? Dido Harding, £37 billion. Has any of that been clawed back?
No, it hasn't.
They also said that the Tories have been trying to help the poorest and not the richest. Okay, but as I said before, they've voted against measures to lift people out of poverty, to increase people's benefits in line with costs in line.
Exactly, Max is right as well. How do you? I mean, they were willing to let Michelle Mone completely, slip their notice, and you're suggesting that that's helping the poorest. How do you rationalise that?
Line with prices, inflation. While at the same time, they've been cutting taxes for the richest. They've been talking recently about getting rid of inheritance tax. And of course, very few people pay inheritance tax. Who pays it? The richest in society. She also said, God bless Rishi Sunak in his wetsuit. Okay. Rishi Sunak there's nothing to be proud of there. There's nothing to be admired. He went out there because he wants to convince his party that he's serious about pulling the lever. There were rumours that the Conservative Party would actually remove him, and it seems he went out there and said, to hell with you guys, I'm going out there, I'm going to deliver a speech. It's raining, it doesn't matter, I'm going to deliver this speech, and we're going to have our general election. So you're not going to remove me. Then he or she, I don't remember which of them, said that he's been there through the pandemic for all of us. No, he's been there for himself. Rishi Sunak became an MP to enrich himself and his family. He became Prime Minister to enrich himself and his family. And recently, we heard the news that over the last year, he has increased his wealth by over £120 million. How are you benefiting from that?
You don't.
Look, I don't know if these people get their information from Facebook or the Daily Express or the Daily Mail or what. But unfortunately, they're being convinced by a political party that doesn't give a crap about them that they're the party that they need to support. And if the Conservatives do hold on to power, well, they'll be back at the food bank the day after. Let me know in the comment section, guys, what you think. As always, your comments are greatly appreciated. Thanks a lot.
Thank you. Well, mind you as well, you got to think very, I'm going to say very seriously, because I think the very serious part about this is that, well, and unfortunately for these two, is that you got to think very, very seriously about what would happen if Labour was to take the reins of government in a matter of weeks. Would the food bank still, because there is a slightly more serious side to this. Yes, I did say it wasn't a problem. I didn't say that food banks didn't exist during the later years of like Gordon Brown's tenure in government, but there is the case to be made, absolutely, about how would Labour solve this issue, because a problem I've one of the interesting things about life you begin to sort of like take on board is that when some people who literally couldn't give a crap about you or anyone else, they will try and bring you down big style. They'll insult you, they'll disrespect you, they will condescend, they will do everything in their power to show that they have complete and utter contempt for you, and will only show any amount of like... Sometimes some people think that the most important person in their life is themselves. And when somebody goes out of the way to break you down, to make you feel so miserable, to destroy your self-respect, you're sort of left to pick up the pieces. It suddenly becomes your responsibility, and it becomes a thing you've got to handle, and something that you've got to help for your... You've somehow... that the burden has been put on your shoulders to make yourself feel respected and like a human being again. You are tarnished, you are hated, you are disrespected, you are a beast of burden, a complete spawn of the earth, and they will feel no shame, remorse, and nobody will ever call them out, and they'll face no consequence for this whatsoever. That was the sort of revelation I came to this previous week. I know it feels like the sort of thing that should happen like when you're at least 10 years old, to realise that sometimes life can be as unfair as that. But you've also got to remember is that Labour have got to be the party to solve this issue. In fact, any party should be the party to solve this issue about how do you restore people's self-respect? How do you save people from having their only supply of income being to be saved from not going to a food bank? How do you put things in line so that you can actually lift people out of poverty? How do you raise morale in this country to even get people on the property ladder? How can you raise morale in people to knowing that they're safe to walk the streets without fear of being stabbed to death? How do you... Because I remember 6 years ago there was a story about a 16-year-old girl literally sitting on a bench at Finsbury Park, and she was just stabbed completely out of nowhere for absolutely nothing whatsoever. No reason I can possibly suggest, and she died for the crime of sitting on a bench. And bear in mind, this isn't like North Korea or the Middle East. This is happening here in this country, in London. It happened all those years ago, but that's sort of what we're up against. Because I don't even think the Conservatives or even know how bad things really are. I mean, and I think it's only testament to the sort of people that are probably not alone in thinking they've completely had enough of these sorts of people as well. Because remember when Nigel Farage tried to preach about the perils of immigration in Newcastle, in my hometown, despite the fact that Nigel Farage... Now, to be honest, immigration isn't necessarily a problem in Newcastle because, well, one, for those who know their geography, Newcastle is in the northeast. It's basically the last big city before you actually enter Scotland. So whether or not migrants were willing to travel all the way from the very south to the very north of the country to seek refuge and stuff like that. I mean, well, you could say the people of Jarrow did that over 100 years ago, but that's then and then. And then somebody threw a milkshake at Farage, and they had to hurriedly escort Farage back into his car immediately, and they had to get out of there. Yeah, that's the sort of hostility. And also the thing about Jacob Rees-Mogg, how he has to have nearly 8 police officers because people were ready to pounce on him the second they got within a striking distance. That's the sort of animosity that has been created in this country, and I think it's rightful that it's being directed towards the people who are responsible. That's the sort of country they've made for themselves. They've made it so that everybody is turning against them, and the tide, ladies and gentlemen, for the Conservatives, I honestly hope more than anything at this point, is going to start rolling back. I think that this is the sort of world we're accustomed to, but a world in which we can't really be comfortable with. We can't be comfortable with the fact that they seem to think that they can get away with it because they have the support and loyalty from people who might not know any better. But then that's the point. If people don't know any better, then why else are they going to vote? Why should they vote for anyone else? But, well, that might be that actually. But whatever the case might be, that's something to consider. Is to remember this is election season. This is a jungle. This is where desperation tactics and look over there are going to appear left, right, and centre. We are at an ideological war, ladies and gentlemen. We are at a crossroads. Arm yourself with knowledge. Thank you.